It's so important to do what you say you're going to do, not just for other people, but for yourself, because it builds character, because it builds evidence, and because it builds your confidence as well. When you're a person that says you're going to do something and actually follows through and does it, it gives you that boost of self-esteem to say, oh, actually, I am a boss. I am a person that does what I say I'm going to do. Welcome to Not Another Money Podcast. Why is it called Not Another Money Podcast, you may be wondering? It's because this is not your typical money show. Get ready for real money conversations and lessons, expert insights from some of our very special guests, and hear some really inspiring stories from everyday people. On this podcast, you're going to learn how to earn more, how to spend less, how to grow the difference, and most importantly, live your best financial life. Hello and welcome back to another episode of Not Another Money Podcast with your host, myself, Tolu Frimpong. So if you have been joining the podcast weekly, you will know that over the last few weeks, I've been joined by some incredible guests in a nice studio space talking about various money topics and hearing their inspiring stories. So I was joined first by Veronia Spain, who is a financial coach, and she shared all about her experience of getting married 3 years ago and the impact that it had on her financially and how her and her husband were able to navigate their finances in those crucial early years of marriage. Very interesting episode. Definitely go and check that out after this one. I was then joined by Abigail, who also shared her inspiring story of how she had had multiple miscarriages and then went on to have 2 daughters, and her grief led her to start her inspiring platform, Ladies in Waiting, where she inspires women that are currently in that season of waiting for motherhood or waiting for marriage or just waiting for that next season of their life. What does it look like and how can they navigate that time in between? So again, a very inspiring episode, and Abigail was dropping some serious life gems, to be honest. So again, a very good episode for you to go back and have a listen to. And then again, most recently, I was joined by another amazing guest who happens to be a very dear friend of mine, Tatenda Metzger, and she shared her very inspiring story of how she was diagnosed with menopause at a very young age. So in her late 20s, in her 30s was diagnosed with ADHD. So she's been through a lot over the last few years, but just hearing her come on and share her story to advocate for these causes that people go through, don't necessarily have the outlet to talk about it or don't necessarily know anybody in their lives that are going through similar situations. Her coming out and sharing her story and removing those stigmas and taboos around those subjects was very inspiring. I learned a lot from that episode and I was inspired just hearing her story again in much detail on the episodes. Again, a very strong and impactful episode for you to go back and have a listen to. But today you'll see I'm flying solo on the episode. I did have another episode which I had planned to release, but due to technical difficulties, I was unable to do that. I was in a space earlier on this week where I was like, okay, this video isn't working out. What am I going to do about it? Am I going to skip a week of uploading episodes and not post something for you guys today? Or am I going to just not allow that to stop me from releasing this episode and fulfill that commitment that I made to you guys of releasing an episode every single week? So you don't care about my stories of technical difficulties and reasons for there being delays to upload. You just expect an upload at a certain time every single week. And my job is to fulfill that obligation. So I was like, no, it's either I cancel and then come back next week or just find a way to make this episode happen. And hence, if you are hearing this episode, you know that I found a way to make this episode happen. So this episode is not very scripted in the way some of my previous solo episodes have been, but we're just going to have a good old chit chat on this episode. And I hope by the end of it, you are inspired, you take away some nuggets and lessons that you can apply, not just to your personal finances, but to your life in general. I'm currently recovering from a flu, so my voice may sound a little bit off, but again, I'm not going to allow those circumstances to stop me from showing up for you guys. See, I am committed to the cause. I'm committed to this podcast. I'm committed to this platform, and I'm committed to you as a listener. And I wanted to make sure that I was able to deliver something of value to you this week. So hopefully you can bear with my sniffly voice and still take something from today's episode. Just going back quickly to the guests that I've had on the podcast so far. It'll be interesting to hear from those of you that have already listened to those episodes, what you thought of those episodes. And equally, if you haven't listened to those episodes, but you do have other finance guests that you would want to have on the podcast or other finance topics that you'd want us to cover on the show that we haven't yet touched upon, leave it in the comment section below or send me a DM over on Instagram, or you can even send me an email just telling me the kind of topics that you want us to further delve into and any particular guests that you want us to invite on the show. And I'll be more than happy to do that outreach and get those guests on for you, and also try and record some episodes around the topics that are most of interest and value to you. I also do want to record a Q&A episode. So I want to do an episode where we sit down and just attack some of the money questions that you may have. So questions around budgeting, side hustling, paying off debt, building an emergency fund, sinking funds, all of those different money topics, which I love to talk about on my platform. If you have any specific questions around these topics that you want me to delve into and answer for you, then please do leave it in the comment section below, or email me or DM me over on Instagram, and I can collate all those questions and put it together for a special Q&A episode where all your questions kind of get answered in one go on that one episode. Another segment that I want to start to incorporate into the show, I might do it just on the solo episodes, or I may do it with guests as well, is to answer some of your money dilemmas. I've had a few of those type of dilemmas in my DMs and over email over the past few years, and it'll be just interesting to kind of collate all of that in one place and answer them again on the show, and just also read out those dilemmas to my audience to see what you think of each other's dilemmas as well. I think that'll be a really interesting segment to incorporate into the show. If that's something that you want to take part in, then just simply email dilemma@tolufrimpong.com. That's dilemma@tolufrimpong.com to submit your dilemma. I can't wait to hear your stories and kind of share my 2 cents worth on the dilemmas that you submit. In terms of updates for you guys, I have an update which some of you may be aware of, some of you may not, but I recently went viral on Instagram. Can you believe it? It was so random that that viral moment occurred. I have been posting one Instagram post a day for the past nearly 3 months now, I think it is, and it was just of random. One of the posts that I did, I basically shared things I wish I knew about marriage in my first year of marriage versus my 13th year of marriage, something to that effect. And I don't know what happened, but the algorithm must have really liked that post and it just went crazy viral. I say crazy viral. For me, it's crazy viral because my Instagram posts ordinarily might get a few thousand reach, but this one was in the hundreds of thousands, and the shares were in the thousands as well. I think one of the good things about that post that I did was I included a call to action, which I rarely do on my Instagram posts actually. I'm just that kind of person that posts what I feel inspired to post, and that's it. I just share what I feel like sharing or what I feel inspired to share, or any questions that I've had that I want to address on the grid. That's kind of just what I create my posts around. I'm not really very salesy in my Instagram. I just kind of share content on there and that's it. And on that particular post, I had a call to action to comment free budget in order for me to send people my free budget template. And the amount of requests that have come through for that budget template is insane, because that budget template isn't new. I've spoken about it online for many, many years now. It's the budget that I've always used to manage my personal finances. And the fact that now all of a sudden all these hundreds of people are now downloading that same template and using it for their budget, it's crazy to me, because I'm just like, this isn't new. I've talked about this before. You've heard it before, but it just reminded me that actually, no, just because some of your audience have heard it before, there's people that are just discovering you that have never heard this before. So while you may feel that it's the same information that you're sharing and you're regurgitating week in, week out, actually, there's always someone new that comes across that information. And for them, it might be the first time that they've been privy to this kind of information. So even though you feel like this is common knowledge, it's not common knowledge if they don't know about it. So that was just a reminder for me that actually there's still work to be done. I haven't yet scratched the surface in terms of the amount of lives that I can help and impact when it comes to the management of their personal finances. That viral moment was very encouraging. It was that boost that I needed to remind me that my work is having an impact, that lives are being touched, people are being changed, people are being helped. I know this anyway because of the messages that I receive and the emails I receive, but it's like you sometimes need that continuous reminder. At least I know for myself that continuous reminder helps. And that viral moment was just that reminder I needed, that actually, Tolu, you are in the right place and you are having the impact on lives that you have set out to have. And just because sometimes it might seem like you're just working in vain, actually, God's working behind the scenes and he has a bigger plan and a purpose for what you're doing. You just have to be faithful to what he has given you to do, that task that he's giving you to do. Take it, run with it and do it well. And you will see the fruit of that in due season. And that is what it reminded me of. In due season, you will reap what you sow. And I think because I had been pouring out to my audience over the last few months, I had been very intentional about sharing, about inspiring, about encouraging, about just sharing free financial education and financial knowledge on my platform, after a while, I'm able to see the fruits of that labor in that post going viral, in so many people now engaging with my work, signing up to my mailing list. My mailing list has had hundreds of new people sign up to it. And if you know anything about marketing, the strongest platform to have is your own platform. So your own website, your own mailing list, as opposed to having big platforms on these social platforms, because you could be here today and gone tomorrow. All it takes is somebody cloning your account and reporting your original account and you getting blocked and kicked off the app. I know so many people who have lost their Instagram platform over the years because of things of that nature, or because of someone scamming them into giving them their details. And then those scammers have now taken over their accounts and are charging them fees to get their accounts back. All of these things happen on these social media platforms, whereas if it's your own platform, nobody's coming to take that from you, and people just take an extra step to engage directly with you. It's a stronger connection that you're making with them versus them just following you on Instagram or any other social media platform. In terms of that post that went viral, things that I wish I knew when I first got married versus in my 13th year of marriage, the things that I wrote in there weren't groundbreaking. These are things that I've been talking about and said so many times before. So things like having joint accounts, things like having budget dates, things like building an emergency fund together, setting financial goals together. All of these things weren't groundbreaking things to me, but just by the comments and engagements on that post, again, it was just that reminder that actually, just because this is something that you've been doing for a while and for you now it's second nature, there's other people that are in that process of just learning and they do need that help. And with that being said, I think it's leading me on to the next point, and that is that I have decided to start taking on one-to-one coaching clients again. I know if you have been with this podcast from the very beginning, you'll know that my first episode, I literally spoke about the fact that I was no longer going to be doing one-to-one financial coaching. And that was because I think I was more consumed with what my peers in the industry were doing. Everyone was going down the financial advisor route, and this is something that I didn't want to do. But I didn't have to go from one extreme to the other. Just because you don't want to be a financial advisor doesn't mean you cannot be a financial coach and you cannot help people at a certain stage of their financial journey. It's not an all or nothing kind of thing. And that's something I've come to realize now from all the messages that I have been receiving for people asking for additional support beyond the free template in which I had sent them. So for me, it's like, okay, Tolu, God has given you a talent. Why are you going to take that talent and bury it and just sit on it and not do anything with that talent? Take that talent and do something with it and be a blessing to other people, and also be able to be a blessing to your family financially too. So it's a win-win situation in that respect. So yeah, I said all of that to say I have decided to open my calendar back up to the public again to take on a few one-to-one coaching clients. So if that is something that you are interested in and want to know more about, definitely check the link in the show notes in order to schedule your coaching session with me. So I am offering 1 hour sessions and blocks of 3 to 6 sessions, depending on your needs and your requirements. And the topics that we will be covering are around budgeting, saving, paying off debt, building an emergency fund, money mindsets, things of that nature. So if those are the areas that you do want help with coaching, please do book yourself in via the link in the show notes and also the link in the description box if you're watching on YouTube. Or you can also email me at coaching@tolufrimpong.com. Send us an email and we can take it from there. I had a little bit of a dilemma today. Episode for Thursday, which I'd been working on getting ready to schedule, but technical difficulties did not allow me to release that episode. So I was in a little bit of a sticky situation. I was like, okay, I need to show up for my audience as scheduled on Thursday, but I don't have an episode ready to go. What am I going to do? And I had a decision to make in that moment. I could either miss an episode of the podcast, or I could script, record, edit, schedule, and create all the promotional materials for a whole new episode. And this is the day before the episode is due to air that I'm recording this episode. So it's literally less than 24 hours before the episode needs to go live. And I was in two minds as to whether or not I could make it happen, because the reality is I need to pick the kids up from school. I need to go to parents' evening for one of my children. I have church this evening and I need to rest. I'm currently trying to start a whole new routine in terms of trying to be disciplined, waking up early and going to bed early. So all of these things are playing into my decision making. I need to release this episode, but the odds are against me right now. How am I going to make it happen? But there was a few things that came to mind while I was considering whether or not to go ahead with making this episode a reality. And I thought I'd share them with you on this episode, actually, because I think it's quite fitting, because it really does help with character building and personal development. In that, as much as it was a difficult thing to do for me to record, edit, and schedule and all the rest of it, this episode, I'm one to always tell my children about the importance of doing hard things. Don't always go for the route of least resistance. In fact, try and take the route of most difficult resistance where you can, because in doing that, that's where you grow and that's where you stretch yourself and that's where you expand yourself. When I was thinking about this episode, because it wasn't something I had initially planned to record today, I was out of ideas. I was like, what am I actually going to come and record this episode on? But it's funny how the brain works. When you put it to work and when you have no other choice but to come up with a solution, solutions start coming to you. And that's what's happened with this episode. Suddenly I've gone from what am I going to make this episode about to, oh my gosh, I could talk about this, I could talk about that. Oh yeah, I need to update them on this. And suddenly, before you know it, I have an outline for the episode. I mean, that's probably by far one of the easiest steps. Outlining it is one thing. Trying to record it and edit it and get it out on time, that's a whole nother case. But the fact is that when you challenge yourself and step outside your comfort zone and push yourself, you'll find that there's so much growth there and you can do a lot more than you think you can do. And I'm just reminded of that saying, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you are right. And I think that was me in this moment, because everything about today just told me I can't do it because there's just so many odds against me. I'm not even feeling well. That's another thing to add to the list of reasons not to record it. My voice is shaky. Like, as I'm talking, I can feel my nose getting more stuffy. But at the same time, I'm like, no, Tolu, you're always preaching to your children about doing hard things. And that's what I intend to do. So yes, I don't feel great, but I'm going to show up, I'm going to perform, and I'm going to hopefully do a great job. And you guys are going to get something from today's episode, which I hope you already have, but there's still a bit more to come. So please do stick around. And if you're enjoying the episode thus far, then please do me a favor and subscribe if you're on YouTube. If you're on Spotify, then just give the episode a love heart or a like, however you do it on the podcast streaming platforms, just to show that you actually enjoy the content over here. And this does help for the podcast to be pushed out to wider audiences so that more people can hear my voice on the internet. No, not really, but it can hopefully get out to a wider audience and help a lot more people on their financial and personal development journey. And the reason why I think the two link so well is that money and mindset are so much interlinked. And I have a couple of guests coming on in future episodes talking about this particular topic, actually, of your money mindset and how important it is. And I think our mindset is something that we really do need to challenge and stretch, because when we challenge our mindset, we're able to do so much more than we think we're able to do. But when we have these limiting beliefs and a limited mindset, it limits our outcomes and it limits what we're able to get done. Another few reasons why I was insistent on recording and releasing these episodes and lessons it taught me is the importance of integrity. Like, it's so important to do what you say you're going to do, not just for other people, but for yourself, because it builds character, because it builds evidence, and because it builds your confidence as well. When you're a person that says you're going to do something and actually follows through and does it, it gives you that boost of self-esteem to say, oh, actually, I am a boss. I am a person that does what I say I'm going to do. It's also so important to be a reliable person. So somebody that people can actually depend on. If you say you're going to do something, you do it, and they can expect you to deliver as you said you would. I think it does help with the audience connection as well, and building that relationship and building that rapport, just to know that actually, yes, this person is a person of their word. If they say they're going to show up, they're going to show up. Same time each week, I can rely on another episode of Not Another Money podcast that I can listen to while I'm at the gym doing my workout, or while I'm going on a school run, or while I'm on my way home from work, whatever it may be, whatever time of day you fit it into your schedule. You can rely on there being another episode the next week. I think reliability is an important character trait that we can all try and develop and cultivate. I think it's so important as well to be adaptable and be able to adapt to different situations and circumstances, because things don't always go according to plan. Things did not go according to plan for me when it came to the recording of this episode. This episode was not even supposed to exist, but yet here we are, because I had to adapt to the situation. Technology didn't want me to be great, but I was not going to allow technology to stop me from showing up for my audience and releasing an episode on Thursday as scheduled. So it's important to be adaptable. It's important to be flexible and realize and recognize that actually things don't always go according to plan, and that's okay. I can be nimble and I can adapt to whatever situation and circumstance I find myself in. Another reason this episode had to happen was, for me, it is so important to keep momentum going. Momentum is that thing that the more you do it, the more it works in your favor. And when you stop momentum, it makes it harder to rebuild that momentum. Also, platforms like to depend on you as well. When they know that, okay, you release videos continuously every week, or you release episodes on Spotify every single week, they can also rely on you to show up at the same time every week. The algorithm gets to know your patterns of uploading as well, and they can also then start working in your favor. But if you're a person that posts an episode today, you ghost your audience the next day, then you're back again in 2 weeks, and then you ghost them again, that inconsistency will have an impact on the momentum of your channel and the platform that you're trying to build. That's why it's so important when you get started to just try and keep going as much as you can consistently to build that momentum and maintain that momentum once it begins. When I look at the analytics for this podcast just over the last 14 weeks, I am blown away. It's been 14 weeks of consistently uploading every week, and week in, week out, the platform is growing. We're getting new followers. We're reaching audiences that I would never have even imagined this podcast reaching. Like, there's literally listeners from all over the world. We have listeners from almost every continent now as we speak. And I think it's just a beautiful benefit of having that momentum, but not just being consistent for the sake of being consistent, but also actually producing quality content that is engaging and helpful to the audience that you're serving. Another thing that swung the pendulum for me is I think it's so important to have high standards for yourselves and set the bar really high and expectation really high, and just push yourself to those high levels, because when you don't have those standards and when you don't set the bar high, we're going to fall to whatever that standard is. If the standard is subpar, then that's where your performance is going to be. But if you set the standard really high, you're going to strive for that high standard of your performance. And that's how it is for me when it comes to this podcast. Like, I am committed, I am devoted to this podcast. Like, I really want it to grow. I really want it to reach audiences even wider than the ones that I've mentioned already, and in numbers that are just mind blowing. I would love to one day have 1 million subscribers to this podcast. It would be amazing. I mean, there's people that have done it before me. I wouldn't be the first person in the world to do it. And if it can happen for them, there's no reason why it can't happen for us over here too. So for me, I've set in the standard high for myself, and I'm pushing for those standards, and I'm hopefully one day going to achieve it. We can look back to this episode, I think it's episode 15 by the time of release, and be like, oh wow, I remember when Tolly was talking about this back in 2024 and saying she wanted to reach this number of subscribers, and look where we are today. God willing, we'll live to see that testimony unfold. But that's the standard that I'm setting for myself, and that's what I'm believing for, and that's what I'm pushing for. So I need to show up in that way with the work that I produce and with the effort that I put in to the content that I create on this platform. So yes, it wasn't ideal sitting down and recording an episode today, because for me, I like to give myself time to prepare and record and edit and all the rest of it. But at the same time, I'm committed, like I said, to showing up for my audience at a particular time every single week. And I didn't want to break that commitment to you guys. So for those of you that are still listening at this stage, I really appreciate you being here. Thank you for your support of the podcast this far. It's been absolutely phenomenal. I think pressure can be a good thing. And for me anyway, I thrive under pressure. I know it's one of those things that people always put on their CVs, like, oh yeah, I work hard under pressure, or I work well under pressure. But I actually do. I feel like I produce my best work when I'm in a pressurized situation, like today, for example, where it's like, oh my gosh, I need to record an episode. What am I going to do? And then all these ideas start flooding to me. And then suddenly, before you know it, I've concocted the episode. And that's how my brain, I guess, works, and my brain thrives in a pressurized situation. So again, for me, I didn't see the fact that, oh my gosh, I need to record and release an episode within 24 hours as that bad a thing. I saw it as a big challenge, yes, and something that seemed impossible, yes, but that was something for me that was thrilling, and I was like, no, I'm going to do it. I'm going to make it happen and make it a reality. And yeah, here we are. 30 plus minutes later. I don't know how long the edit's going to be by the time I've chopped it all up, but we made it to the end of the podcast episode just like that. We've had a catch up. We've spoken about the guest episodes, and just to recap, we've spoken about the guest episodes and the 3 guests that I've had so far, talking about the early ADHD and menopause diagnosis, the early miscarriage stories. Gosh, we've had a lot of heavy topics over the last few weeks, and there's so much more that we can still cover. We haven't scratched the surface on all the different topics that we can cover on Not Another Money podcast, because like I always say, this is not your typical money show. And I think money is one of those things that impacts so many areas of our lives. So even though you might initially hear some of the topics and think, okay, that's nothing to do with money, actually you always find there is a route back to money, or somehow it always has implications on us financially. That's why I think it's important to tackle so many of these different topics within the podcast. So hopefully you're going to stay with us on this journey. And like I said, if you have any dilemmas that you want to submit to the show for us to answer on episodes, either solo or with the guests, send them across to dilemmas at tolufrimpong.com. And then also, if you wanted to help with that one-to-one coaching, which we spoke about earlier, if one-to-one coaching is something you want to book, then do book yourself in via coaching at tolufrimpong.com. And I'll also, again, link that in the show notes and in the description box so that you can schedule a call. And then just finally, just to recap the stuff that we've discussed on this episode, I think the main heart of the episode was just to show that whether you believe you can or you believe you can't, you are right. And we can do hard things if we stretch ourselves and we challenge ourselves to make the impossible possible. So for me, that was in the context of me recording this episode that you're currently listening to. But for you, that could be in a different context. It could be you overpaying on your debt that you need to clear. It could be you saving £200 this month instead of saving £100 you had initially planned. It could be you saying no to takeaways for the rest of the year. I know that sounds like a wild statement, but just imagine that, not buying takeaway food for the next 3 months, and every pound that you had initially planned to spend on takeaway, you take that and you save that money. By the end of the year, you could have a good 600-700, maybe even 1,000 if you're a regular Uber Eats user. You can have that kind of money saved by the end of the year. That's a hard thing if you're somebody that's used to regularly eating out, or you're somebody that's used to regularly going out for friends to eat meals as well. Just making that decision that, no, I'm going to make these sacrifices. I'm going to cut back on a few meals every month. That's a sacrifice. That's doing a hard thing. That's something that's uncomfortable. That's something that's stretching you because it's not something you ordinarily would do. Saying no to yourself, saying no to others. If you're somebody like me that likes to please people, that's an even harder challenge and an uphill battle in itself. So there's so many things that you can commit to, challenging yourself to step outside your comfort zone, doing something that makes you uncomfortable, and seeing the growth in yourself that comes from it. Not even just the growth in yourself, you can also see a lot of growth in your finances. But anyway, just like that, we have come to the end of another episode of the podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. There are so many episodes for you to catch up on now. If you're just joining us for the first time, please do listen to the playlist and previous episodes and engage with all the podcast platforms, just to let us know that you've been listening and that you've enjoyed it. In fact, to let us know that you've been listening, leave a comment to share one hard thing that you're going to commit to doing before the end of 2024. If I see that comment, then I know that you have made it to the end of the show, and you're not going to get anything, to be fair, just satisfaction of knowing that you made it to the end and you were able to participate in this little challenge. So yes, I'll challenge you in the comments or in the review. Just share one thing that you're going to challenge yourself to achieve before the end of 2024. Won't it be so amazing to come back early next year to the same podcast episode and share the fact that you were able to achieve that goal that you set out to achieve? Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode, and I will speak to you on the next one. Bye.